Welcome, Internet. I'm Mark E, and I'd like to talk about Deathloop. Deathloop is a first-person shooter set in a time loop, but to call it a first-person shooter is a bit too reductive, and calling it a time loop is stretching it. Deathloop is built on the foundations of Arcane Studios' years of immersive sim design. This means you got a lot of options on how you want to fight. We're talking dozen or so types of guns, like pistols, machine guns, and shotguns. We're talking about being able to sneak up behind someone and press a button to murk them. We're talking about powers, or slabs, like teleportation, invisibility, and telekinesis. We're talking hacking turrets, and most of all, we're talking kicks.
What?
All of this leads to a really flexible style of play as you slowly accumulate new guns and powers that, once you get into the swing of things, is tremendously fun. It's getting into the swing of things that's the problem. Deathloop has about a 3-hour tutorial. At best it feels handholdy, and at worst it feels overwhelming. 3 hours long is a big commitment, and is a lot to ask, but in this time it sets up its world and teaches you how the time loop works. You play as Colt. You wake up on an island that experiences a time loop. At the end of the day, time resets and everyone forgets what happened the day before. Except you. Well, except you and Juliana. If Colt is the protagonist trying to break the loop, Juliana is the antagonist who's trying to protect the loop. She's often in your ear, taunting you. She will also invade your game and attack you as you explore the world. Even wilder is you can set the game up to allow people on the GD internet to play as Juliana, making for the ultimate game of cat and mouse. I don't recommend having it turned on your first time playing. In order to break the loop, Colt must kill 8 visionaries who brought everyone here in the first place. The tutorial shows you how to kill one of the visionaries, but more importantly, it teaches you how to bring back gear to future loops. Speaking of loops, I don't think Deathloop is really a time loop game. To me, a time loop game is a game like 12 Minutes or Majora's Mask. There's an in-game clock that the world reacts to in a clockwork manner. People rise and shine and carry out tasks based on the time of day. Deathloop, on the other hand, starts in the morning but begins with you choosing where to go. Once you're there, time is effectively frozen. You could spend 24 hours in a level and the time of day will not change. Not until you exit via a set of tunnels does time move to the next chunk, noon, followed by afternoon and evening. Each location is different based on the time of day, and certain events do affect things in other areas, but I still wouldn't call it a time loop game. Once you get through this tutorial, the world becomes your oyster. You are left to solve the murder puzzle of how to kill the 8 visionaries. For me, this is where Deathloop most shines. Everything feels fresh. You are constantly finding new guns that will dramatically change how you can approach a situation. You're getting information for your slick journal, which guides you step by step on how to kill each visionary. And once you start knocking off the visionaries, you're able to collect slabs, which can really change how you approach the game. Once you have Shift, the slab that lets you instantly teleport, the environment becomes a playground for you to deal out death. And how about those environments? At the heart of any good immersive sim is its level design, and Arcane's years of experience pays off. The 4 locations are relatively small. Where every game is an open world monstrosity, Deathloop's 4 levels may not seem like much. But I swear, they have so sublimely filled these 4 spaces. Levels wrap into themselves. You'll feel like you're moving through a space to only suddenly realize you've come back to where you started. Even after concluding the story, there were still parts of the levels I had not fully discovered. Each place feels distinct and yet cohesive to this island. Getting to know the levels of Deathloop is what makes Deathloop worth playing. That said, I am sad to say that the game does become a bit rote after a while. You will find the best way to move through the levels that it becomes a bit too familiar by the end. Also, before you go in, know that you will not be satisfied by the ending. They added an extra cutscene about a year after launch, and it adds a little more resolution, but Deathloop is fine to leave most questions unanswered. But hey, they did confirm it's in the Dishonored universe. So, does Deathloop have an overly long intro and get a bit rote by the end? Sure. But it's also one of my favorite games I've played this year. Playing around with the tools and environment, learning about this mysterious world where a bunch of rich assholes made a little playground for themselves, and then systematically dismantling it, is a hell of a rush.